Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today's build is the Shatterstrike Spellblade. Now we're doing an updated version of a dual welding pure hit critical strike Shatterstrike build for the Spellblade that I had done a patch or two ago, but in this one we're going to change it up completely because some things inside the skill tree changed which allow for a little bit more damage, and we're also going to run this as a no unique build. Now there are some uniques that are beneficial to the build that will make it do even more damage, but they can be a little tricky to craft around, so we're going to do this version as a completely no unique build. However, I will go over the uniques in the item section and which ones will benefit you and raise up the damage that we do or increase your survivability, and if you happen to have those, you can throw them on until you craft something better, or if you like those better, keep them. Now this build is a very high DPS build. The way it works is you're going to run into enemies, you're going to use Shatterstrike, a melee skill which is going to generate a lot of ward, do a lot of damage, and it's going to auto recast twice. Now the DPS on it says 150,000 damage per second, but it only takes in the first hit. Since we're actually doing 3 hits, it's closer to about 500,000 damage per second, and as you can see, that's about what you need to take the bosses down as quick as we are. And on the training dummy, you're hitting so quickly, and each one of your hits is doing anywhere from 80 to 110,000 damage, and it's just like 30 of them in about 2 seconds, which is just crazy. So let's go ahead and get into the skills and how exactly it works. For skills, I'm running Enchant Weapon, Surge, Flame Ward, Shatterstrike with 2 extra levels, and Mana Strike. For Enchant Weapon, we use this because it is a great utility skill for boosting your damage temporarily. So we went up to the top right and we have Frostband with 5 points for that 25 added melee cold damage and 100% increased melee cold damage. This is a huge boost of damage, and then what goes along with boosting damage? Attack speed, of course. So with 4 points in celerity, we have 40% increased melee attack speed, which is going to let you burn through your mana in about 2 seconds with Shatterstrike while doing really great damage. This gives a huge burst of damage, so I always try to save a full amount of mana that I have for a Shatterstrike spam whenever I use Enchant Weapon. We also have 1 point in Frozen Sparks because this will give you 1 additional melee cold damage for every 10 physical damage you have from your weapons, which means that we have 2 for a total of 106 melee physical. I think it rounds up, maybe you get 11, but you get at least 10. Then we have 4 points in Concentration to improve the duration from a 5-second base to a 9-second total, and 4 points in Efficacy so that it no longer costs any mana, and you have 40% increased melee elemental damage. For Surge, I have 1 point in Jolt, 5 points in Storm Battery, and the way this works is after you surge while it's on cooldown, every attack that you do, a melee attack that hits an enemy, will give you a dormant energy buff. And for each one of these buffs, the next time that you surge or once your 4 seconds is up and it's off cooldown, these kind of just automatically fall off and are considered consumed. When that happens, for every stack that you had, you'll gain 20 ward and you'll get 1 fire aura thanks to 4 points in fulmination and the 2 points in insulation. And what that leads to is a bunch of fire auras that can kill rats and things around you if you happen to be out of mana and can't Shatterstrike, and the extra ward is always good protection. Now, I never found myself actually getting the full 10 stacks. I normally ended up with like 4 to 5 depending on how it was going. So putting a full 5 points in here isn't really necessary. 3 will do the trick, so feel free to take 2 points out and put them somewhere else unless you find yourself getting those maximum 10 stacks. Also got 2 points in Expanse and 1 point in Stagnant so that we immobilize any target that we hit at the end of our surge for 1 second, and then 2 points in Shocking Blows, 2 points in Lightning Rush, and 1 point in Shielding Advance so that we are invulnerable while surging. For Flame Ward, once again, using this for a bit of defense and offense, and we've converted it to cold, which don't know if that's really necessary considering we also converted it to cold in our passive tree, so you can decide what you want to do between here and the passive tree. However, I have it spec'd into both in both places. Here we have 5 points in Star Ward Defense for that 200 ward granted, and 5 points in Barrier so that you take 40% less hit damage while it's active. 3 points in Dilation will increase its duration and give it mana efficiency, 5 points in Infusion gives you 250% increased fire, which we have converted to cold, so you'll get 250% cold damage while it is active. 1 point in Fire Aura, so you'll get a Fire Aura whenever you activate Flame Ward, and 1 point in Frost Ward to convert that Fire Aura into cold, and also convert Flame Ward into a cold skill, which will now have retaliation and a freeze rate with that retaliation, as well as Fire Aura will gain a freeze rate of 48 per second. For Shatterstrike, our main damaging skill, which we have 2 extra levels in, the way that we are using this is to try and do as much damage as quickly as possible, and we're not building into dots, so we're not doing any of the ignite conversion into frostbite or any of the frostbite. We are wearing 2 swords, and because of that, it allows for a huge amount of critical multiplier thanks to the cold steel node, which gives you 120% critical strike multiplier per sword. Since we're wearing 2, that's 240% critical strike multiplier from 1 node with just 4 points, which is like, I'm pretty sure the most I've ever seen in any skill, especially for one that hits as fast and as much as Shatterstrike, which just brings the DPS of this build when you can get towards 100% crit with it, just absolute crazy. Then we got 2 points in Lingering, 1 point in Breath of Cold, and 2 points in Whiteout. This is what causes it to recast. So this reduces your attack speed, increases the mana cost, almost tripling it. And then from there, what will happen is you cast Shatterstrike 1 time, and then it automatically, instantly recasts twice more, so you don't have to do anything for that. So basically, you're getting 3 attacks for the price of 1. Well, not price, but for the time consumption of 1 attack, it will cost you. And then we have 1 point in Ice Blink, 3 points in Icy Flow will give it some mana efficiency to counteract that huge massive mana cost increase. We ended up with a 33 mana cost, which isn't horrible, it's doable, but it does get a little spendy and your mana will fly down with the attack speed that we have. And then we have 2 points in Absolute Zero for 30% more damage multiplier. This reduces the attack speed a little bit further. And 3 points in Cold Presence gives you 75% more hit damage to any enemy with 75% or more damage. What's nice about this is a lot of enemies that you're doing basically double damage to with this node is that they are like rare enemies or something, and since you did the hit before they actually went down in life, it doesn't work like Endurance or anything else that, you know, starts doing damage reduction once you hit a threshold. This just applies a huge amount of damage right off the bat, so it's very effective for doing a lot of damage, and it lets you one-shot a lot of things that you wouldn't have been able to one-shot before. And then for the final skill, we got Mana Strike. This is to obviously get our mana back. If you do not like Mana Strike, there's always Focus. If you don't like Focus, well, there's always running around until the mana comes back. But in this case, we're trying to get as much mana as possible. We did make it ranged so that we can use it from afar, so that as enemies run towards us, we can get full of mana, and then once they're close enough, we'll Shatter Strike them and continue that trend. If you don't like that, you can always take off the 1 point teleporting strike so that it is not ranged. You'll get 80% more mana, which is about 60 to 70 mana on a crit hit with it, which you're at 100% crit with this skill, so you'll always crit, which means with just 2 strikes of Mana Strike, you'll be full mana. We got 2 points in Rage Sap, 2 points in Swift Sap, 3 points in Sprite Braid, 4 points in Mana Drain for 80% more mana gains, which kind of counteracts the whole 80% less, and then 4 points in Critical Mana, so when you do a crit strike, you will get 12 additional mana. So the way it normally works, you get 15 with the skill, 9 with the Arcanist Blade, and then an additional 12, and then you have 80% more with 80% less, so don't even worry about that. Basically what you end up with is on a crit strike, you're getting 36 mana. And then 1 point in Critical Rejuvenation so that you don't do any extra critical strike multiplier with the skill, so you know your regular hits a crit hit, but you have such high base crit chance you're guaranteed a critical strike with it to get the extra mana, which is all that we are using it for. For passives, I got 31 points in the Mage base class, with 8 points in Scholar, 8 points in Arcanist, 5 points in Mage Flurry, and 10 points in Knowledge of Destruction. 0 points in the Sorcerer, and 80 points in the Spellblade R Mastered class. We got 6 points in Elemental Affinity, 1 point in Flamewalker, 8 points in Infused Weapon, 8 points in Arcane Warden, 1 point in elemental strikes, 5 points in arcane shielding, and 5 points in shattered ages. So the way this works is you can now have 4 stacks of arcane shield instead of just 1, but at a 60% reduced effect. So what that means is normally you get 10% less damage taken and you get 20 ward per second. If you take away 60% of that, what you would end up with is 4% damage reduction and only 8 ward per second. But now that you can have 4 stacks, you can get up to 16% damage reduction and 32 ward per second if you follow the numbers correctly and always have 4 stacks upside. But you get 1 stack every time that you do a melee attack and hit an enemy. You'll get that stack for 4 seconds. Then we have 5 points in Essence Duel, 5 points in Mana Reaver, 5 points in Inferno, 1 point in Flame Drinker, and 5 points in Blades of Fires. Since we were going to ideally be able to get 10 stacks of Fire Aura with a Surge, we were going to be able to get 50% of our increased melee damage here from this node. However, since we weren't actually getting that many stacks, we weren't getting that much of a damage boost. So these are kind of like the last points I would put into the tree, and you could actually put them somewhere else if you wanted, although there aren't very many better spots for them. Also got 5 points in Riverblade, 8 points in Prismatic Blade, and 10 points in Volka's Razor. For items and idols, for the idols, increased melee elemental damage is huge. You can also get flat melee cold damage, but that's less effective as you have so much added cold damage already. You're not going to see a huge difference by getting a bunch of melee cold damage on the idols. You can get up to +4 on each one for a total of +16, which really just isn't that much. So be more worried about getting that increased elemental damage. You can get up to 70% on each idol for that 280% increase, and that's going to do you well more. But if you do have some hybrid ones like this that give you both, of course that's going to be the best. For our crafted items, as you can see here, we're wearing nothing but crafted items. I'm just going to hover over them all really quick for you. They will all be in the build planner, which will be in the written guide, which will be connected in the description. So you can click on that and go over these and play around with them, see what you got. Or you can pause the video now if you'd like to. And then we're going to cover really quickly what we have for the uniques. So these uniques are, I wouldn't put them as best in slot, but if you have these uniques, they're going to do just about as well as some of these crafted items. If you don't have these crafted items and you do have the unique, they'll do you better than until you can craft the item that you need. If you have an exalted item, it's going to be better than these uniques. But the first one we got up is Urane's Wisdom. This is going to give you a huge amount of health, and when you're at full health, it's going to give you 30 added melee cold damage, which is pretty huge. And then if you do start to lose health, you can leech a bunch of it. We also got the Prison Wraps. Now this one's pretty good for being defensive. If you're struggling to survive, Prison Wraps could be the thing to keep you alive. And the way it works is it's going to let you take 30% less elemental damage, which is pretty big numbers. Then it's going to have you do 30% increased elemental damage, gives you some critical strike chance, and you can leech up to 8% of your elemental damage as health on crit, which since we're aiming for really close to 100% crit, that's almost every hit. So these can be really effective in this build. If you're having trouble crafting good swords for this to get that critical strike up, you will lose a lot of your critical strike with the shard of the Shattered Lance, but these bad boys are basically made for a Shatterstrike build. They're going to give you freeze rate multiplier, increased melee cold damage, added melee cold damage, and then of course the normal 53 melee physical damage as every DSI swords has. So throwing 2 of these bad boys is also good, but remember with these you're not going to have anywhere near the same amount of critical strike chances you have with the crafted swords, and the reason we went with the crafted swords was so that you could get that added melee critical strike chance on both of them. Then we have the Morning Frost boots. These are probably the biggest DPS boost that you can get to it, and the reason for that is you can get +1 cold damage for every point of dex. Now we're only running in this build 44 dex, but having 44 dex is a lot of dex. That's 44 added cold damage for this unique. Now you will have to change around your resistances a little bit and get some extra physical and cold resist, because they'll both go down by 44% when you put these on. But this is a big damage boost, and to show you what kind of damage boost I'm talking about, right now the DPS with nothing going is almost 38,000. Throwing these boots on is going to put you at 48,000. So you're talking about a 25% increase in damage, which is pretty big for it. And then the other one is the Blown Clamor Barbuette, which gives you Dex, Int, Necrotic Resist, Ward per second. This thing's pretty nice if you don't have a nice crafted helm. However, our crafted helm comes with that implicit of critical strike chance, which is really going to increase your critical strike. 70% critical strike chance there is going to help you on your way to 100% crit. So if you want to sacrifice some crit, again, that's basically what a lot of these uniques fight against, is the crit chance. You can definitely throw those on. And then for our character sheet, as you can see, well, we lost some resistance there. We're almost capped on resistance. We're a little low on poison. We have about 10% armor. We built around dodge a little bit. It's really hard to stack it to a point where it's really efficient. Getting 50% dodge on the Spellblade without using a potion, a dodge potion on the build, is pretty hard to do. So it's something that if you don't really want to build into dodge, you could just get more life if you wanted and try to build around more leeching, because you're doing great damage anyways. And then for the DPS of this build, so right now we have Shatterstrike, which has 38,000 DPS. Now, to remember this, that's counting your attack speed with the attack of the skill, but this skill recast, which is not calculated into the DPS, so you're actually doing 3 times that damage. And when you use your Enchant Weapon and your Flame Ward, it's actually going to go up even higher. So if you pop those bad boys, you jump up over 100,000 damage per second, and technically that's tripled because you're doing 3 attacks. So you're actually doing closer to about 350,000 DPS, and you're closer to 500,000 when you throw on the Morning Frost boots. So what I like to do is I like to put Flame Ward and Enchant Weapon both on autocast, and then I will surge around when I need to, which also has some decent DPS. You'll notice it'll crit and even kill trash mobs in 1 hit for you. Mana Strike when you need mana, and then Shatterstrike obviously whenever you need to kill enemies. And as you can see by the damage, you can get over your 100k crits. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous the amount of damage that we were doing right there. Like, well over 1,000,000 damage in just a couple of seconds. So, as you can see in the gameplay, he killed things extremely quickly, but then you'll need to get your mana back. And like here, when you go to get your mana back, you can get it pretty quick with Mana Strike. Right there, we got it about as fast as we spent it. Remember, if you don't do the ranged version, you can get it back in just 2 hits and go back to Shatter Striking, which is super effective. Alright, let's go ahead and get into some gameplay.